The Sports Time Podcast.
I totally forgot about this, but this has been kind of the hot story in baseball right now. The whole, the substances that a pitcher can throw, or they can't throw or use certain substances when throwing. What do you think about that? And I don't really like the rule, and I think they should have gave the pitchers a year and should have just made it next year. But what do you think about that rule? And is there a chance that somehow the MLB ends up going back on their decision?
Yeah, so that's been a very interesting development. I knew about foreign substance abuse, but I didn't really understand how much of an impact it was having until I looked at the spin rate data myself. I mean, I looked at some guys' numbers and you just see a spike. Their spin rate went up 300 RPM over a year. I mean, you're like, whoa, and because we didn't have StatCast prior to 2015, it wasn't really something we paid attention to. And I'm sure, honestly, before 2015, of course, players were using foreign substances, but they weren't using it the same way they are now to get the extra spin because they just didn't. I don't think we have the technology for them to know how much it enhanced performance. So I think I'm neutral on it. Because I feel bad for the hitters because I want the hitters to have a fair playing field because a lot of people blame them and say, oh, baseball's unwatchable, 3 true outcomes, everyone strikes out now. But it's not fair to the hitters to say that when you have pitchers who are throwing, filthy breaking balls because they have foreign substances. I mean, that's the reason why. That's honestly the reason we have empirical data showing that's the reason why offense has been down, strikeouts have been up. So we can get some of these these old timers like Gary Sheffield. He went on a rant about this and he doesn't watch baseball because strikeouts are up. I'm like, well, why don't you try to hit? Even you in your prime, Gary, right now, if you try to hit in today's game, I promise you strike out at a higher clip. So that's the thing. I'm happy to see the strikeout rates cool down a little bit, at least in the early data. That's what it showed. But yeah, it is tough for the pitchers. Glasnow himself claimed that he believes it contributed to his injury because he has to grip his breaking ball different. He has to grip the ball tighter to get a hold, which is definitely possible. I mean, if you've thrown 80 innings in the season with rosin or whatever he was using, and then all of a sudden you have to stop. Yes, that's going to take some adaptation. So yeah, it definitely would have been more fair for them to usher it in during the off season, giving everyone a full off season to train with it. But something did have to be done about the lack of balls in play, because not only was it a bad look for the hitters, but for revenue wise, for viewers, fans of the game, Major League Baseball was having a hard time retaining viewership because of the lack of action. So everything baseball's trying to do is to increase the number of balls in play, and I mean, banning the shift is something they're experimenting with the minor leagues, obviously. So reducing strikeouts, more balls in play, you have more eyes watching the game, more excitement, more revenue at the end of the day, which is what they want. So, and more revenue for baseball is good for everyone. Even the pitchers that are complaining about it, it's going to help them at the end of the day. I mean, it's good for everyone.
Yeah, and I think as much, I don't really know a whole lot about the rule. Like I've seen what it is, but I feel like it's really like the pitchers were not very happy. But the MLB should have went it as a different route. They should have controlled it better and said, "Hey, we'll give you a year, or we'll give you some time." They gave him 10 days or something like that.
Yeah.
So didn't like the way they went about it. But I can still understand it, but I just didn't like the way they went about it. But at the end of the day, we'll end up seeing what happens. Thanks for listening to the Sports Town Podcast, or the STP Pod for short. You can find us on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube, and much more. Also, follow us on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter at Sports Town Podcast. If you want to check out more videos of the Sports Town Podcast, click on the right.